So thank you so much, colleagues. It's good to thank you again to Carly and Terry for the invitation. And just as everyone, I think it's a great opportunity to speak to colleagues about impact. And something that I will say, perhaps in the spirit of Joe as well, is that I'm speaking today as well to ask for advice from colleagues about strategies and just ideas moving forward. So I am speaking about a concrete project. The approach that I'll be taking for this particular workshop is to share, the specific impact details and texts that we used in a successful bid to the British Academy for support on this specific project. And the idea is that, I would say it isn't particularly groundbreaking or original. In fact, we're hoping to achieve impact in a slightly more traditional way. But I am really excited and looking forward to hearing ideas from colleagues about ways in which we can improve the ways in which this research can lead to impact. So Terry, if you could go to the next slide. So sorry, just to say that the context of this is that it's a joint application that I made together with two colleagues, Han-Wei Li and Jingran Yu, at the University of Manchester. They've since moved actually to positions in China since the grant. So the context of the project, so as I said, the title is about international students, security, safety, and communication. It's a response to a call by the British Academy, the COVID small grants call. So it was issue-based. It was relatively rapid response. It's a relatively small grant amount. So the ceiling for this was £10,000. And in the context, so there are kind of things that can allow you to do and other things that it can't. And it builds on previous work done by the Manchester China Institute and colleagues at the Institute of Education. So as Joe did, right? Just very briefly to introduce, right, some of our previous work and research. So at MIE, so there is a higher education research kind of group or network. And not just that, there are lots of actually Chinese and East Asian students as well. So I guess it really bubbles up from our actual interactions and kind of, our local knowledge actually of this particular field. I will say that one of the prompts for this specific research project was that although we were learning from an ongoing study with the Manchester China Institute that Chinese students were experiencing microaggression, racism on the streets of Manchester, especially in the early parts of COVID, but actually sadly continuing up until today, right? There's maskophobia and verbal aggression that they have on the street. What we found very interesting was that the university itself didn't have any records of this aggression, and as far as the university was concerned, since no complaints or no students had reported this, so I guess they have a sense that it might be happening, but nothing was being reported up to the channels of the university, and that was a puzzle for us about then how does the university react to quote unquote data or complaints that it's not, or these hidden factors that it's not being told. So go ahead, Terry. You can. So this was the abstract of what we found. First of all, really just to state the facts, that there was a 21% increase in hate crimes against these Asian communities, particularly Chinese people, in the early months. But as I said, which continues, perhaps not to the same, we're not sure whether it has proceeded to the same extent or not, and that this has affected the well-being of, first of all, the population that we were in touch with, Chinese and East Asian looking students, and on which we have a kind of wider program of research on the well-being of East Asian students in the UK, in higher education in the UK. So this is kind of offshoot of that. So we weren't particularly doing anything kind of, groundbreaking or novel. We're going to conduct a kind of large-scale survey, some targeted interviews with certain people. What we will also try to do, though, is to do a bit of social media research on Chinese social media, basically to understand the discrepancy between the discourse among students, East Asian students, among themselves, what they're saying about their experiences, and what actually is reported in at the universities. So not just at Manchester, but across the country. So we've targeted the top 20 universities in the UK that host Chinese and East Asian students. So what their official records are of these incidents, as well as the corresponding records of local police constabularies or offices in those communities where those universities are, and just try to match that. So if you move on to the next slide, Terry. So basically the kind of the previous slide. Yes. So the impact aspiration statement is that it will enable. So this study, precisely because of the funds allocated in one, is relatively focused on higher education. So the impact is in fact meant for higher education communities to enable staff and, well, eventually wider local communities to improve strategies and practices of safety and well-being of students. So next slide. So we just basically say that these are the things we wanted to do. We wanted to raise awareness, first of all, among university staff. So we kind of outlined our target groups and over which we wanted to achieve impact on the basis of what we will learn from the research project, Chinese and East Asian students, and to make them aware of the potential differences in how they understand and report incidents around safety and aggression. And then this was a little bit challenging based on the resources available. But later on, I'll talk about perhaps strategies about like how to achieve wider impact, perhaps by bundling up the research findings here and trying to apply for further funding to extend, the impact is wider local communities to provide heightened awareness regarding a safer and equitable environment. In this specific case, I am thinking about the wider local community in terms of towns and cities that host large numbers of Chinese students. Very often, as in the case of Manchester, there is a kind of relationship between the city, the local community, and the university, and it's possible to make local authorities aware of these specific concerns by corresponding with, for instance, in the case of Manchester, the mayor's office or the local police office. And obviously, right, like the wider thing of like bringing this up to academic discussion. So yes, we will be making, writing academic papers about this. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we'd had several work packages. Obviously, the first set of work packages were really about doing the research and generating the ideas. And then, as I said, might not sound particularly novel, but I mean, the intervention is really about generating a policy report and a policy brief, something that's easily understood and can be circulated among university leaders, policymakers, the local and hopefully national level, and other relevant stakeholders to address incidents of racism. So, I mean, GM, so as I said, there is a linked study that we're proposing. I can't speak about it now. We're waiting to hear about the results, but that's in cooperation with GMP, Greater Manchester Police, and the kind of GM community safety group. And we'll see whether we'll be able to extend it that far. So the idea is precisely to have this policy brief that we can use to raise awareness and begin those discussions. I think this is one of the first levels of impact that can be achieved, especially given our initial finding, which is that the incidents are not reported. So I think we felt that awareness raising was very important in this specific context where information wasn't being shared in the same way and was invisible in some areas, whereas it might be much more visible in other areas, such as Chinese social media. Yeah, the next slide, please. So the sixth training was really training management outreach events. So the idea is that, well, based on the findings, really there is a way to, I think, bring stakeholders together. So for instance, to speak very concretely, just to the people, for instance, at our university and other universities who are in charge of local community security. So Manchester has kind of a local security force. The university has a local security force. It has an analog at other different universities. There's also kind of a local counseling service, and we just want them to be aware actually of the differences in ways that Chinese and East Asian students understand report and speak about their concerns and issues about security without necessarily painting these kind of wide, falling into cultural stereotypes. We just wanted to show them what the data was saying and hopefully to discuss with them, well, if here on the one hand we have students directly reporting these incidents, and on the other hand you don't have any of those things in your records, well then we need to try and improve that situation. Yeah, if we go to the next slide, please, Taryn. Yeah, so that's really linked to the previous one. So what I've done here is really, in case people were interested to review that, I mean, I did want to make our bid text as transparent as possible. I also thought that that might be something that colleagues might be interested in, to see what we said. This was a particularly competitive call to the British Council, so it might be actually something that colleagues can learn about in terms of like what we said, and hopefully what the British Council and their reviewers found value in. So one of the things that we wanted to do is precisely, apart from those workshops, is to produce something specific and tangible as a training, something very practical, a training guidebook that was also to be used in a workshop, like bespoke workshop that we would design for these universities and that we would run. But the idea is that, well, apart from the policy brief, which is, I suppose, like raising issues and awareness, the idea is to really have a training guidebook, right? Like here's like 1, 2, 3 very specific things to do. Perhaps have a person monitoring Chinese social media, have someone on the local security team that understands issues X, Y, and Z. So we are hoping to generate that from the results of our study. Next slide, please. Yes, just to say that, as I said, maybe this idea, I like the way that Joe mentioned reflections, is that I think research spills over into other things, especially, right, like when projects are related. So as I said, we are looking to relate this to other research projects and research bids moving forward, especially where we realize that we need more resources potentially and other local partners to help us achieve the impact that we want. And we're responding, again, I'm unable to share the results at the moment, but we're responding to another call, this time with the police, right? Like in kind of like a research police-led initiative. And we're hoping that we can, through this and perhaps other kind of reformulations of the research project, cooperate with other bodies, respond to other calls, and try to extend the impact to relevant communities in other ways. But that's just one idea, and I'm happy to discuss in questions about like how we did that. So we also thought about the ESRC IAA, if and when, as we understood it, if and when we need a kind of like a booster amount of funds to, after establishing the facts, to carry out more impact from this study. So that was also something that we're reflecting, thinking about. Yeah, and finally, the last slide is really just, as I said, really to thank you all for the attention and really to ask for ideas and comments. Obviously, we have the protocols in place. I mean, there's no time to share all of those things and the kind of like all the concrete steps of the research, but I'm happy to share with colleagues who are interested. Thank you.
Right. Not sure I did a good job of sharing the screen at that point, but I think we got through all your slides, Miguel. Thank you. That was a very interesting presentation again. And again, sort of picking up some of the threads around impact is the different ways that academics are having to kind of engage or create different products. So whether or not it's reports, conducting workshops, doing training, almost lobbying, etc., etc. I think these are some of the aspects that come along with the role of trying to engage in a more impactful way as an academic.